So this is the Aqua scooter that some of you saw me with underneath the water, 20-30 feet deep, running off of my scuba tank. And there's been some questions when I first posted the video that I just haven't ever gotten around to answering. People were more curious about how I did it. The biggest problem I had was making sure that the pressure inside the scooter was equal to the pressure outside the water. I couldn't run positive pressure or it would blow out the seals, and if I had negative pressure it would either flood the ignition box or flood the fuel tank. So I had the idea of using a scuba diving regulator which automatically equalizes the pressure in your lungs with the pressure of the water pushing down on you. Outside pressure is the same as the pressure inside your lungs. It sounds far-fetched, but that's the way it works. If you're not a scuba diver, if you're under 30 pounds of pressure in the water, there is 30 pounds of pressure inside your lungs pushing back out. That's what keeps you from going flat, I guess. So anyway, the ignition chamber, I drilled and tapped it, screwed in just a brass 90 with a barb fitting, and that vents right up into the air filter housing. The air coming in through the diving regulator equalizes the pressure inside the whole intake box. So since that's vented into the the ignition coil, the seals don't have to even try to keep out the water. The pressure inside is the same as the pressure outside, so I do not have to worry about the seals leaking. The other problem I ran into is trying to equalize the fuel tank. You don't want water in your gas when you're trying to cruise along. This whole setup is, can't really show you, but the gas tank is the biggest part of the Aqua scooter. It vents the carburetor, it's got little tubes that come up, keeps the water out. So anyway, the vent, which sticks up into the gas tank, I didn't want that venting gas into the ignition chamber, so the vent for that runs across to the other side, and again I drilled and tapped the muffler. This whole thing is just a big exhaust chamber, so I tapped it, put another barb fitting in it, put a fuel filter off of Briggs & Stratton in here just to keep any debris from working its way backward into the fuel tank from the exhaust, chunks of carbon, whatever might be going through there. So, and the reason I did that was if any gas gets into the line, it's just going to blow it out through the exhaust port into the water, just like an outboard boat motor engine, for those of you that love two-strokes. And so the exhaust, there again, the air coming in through the scuba regulator is equalized. It goes through the carburetor, it's still equalized, goes through the piston, comes out the exhaust. If anything, it might be slightly positive pressure, which isn't bad at all when it's just going into your fuel tank. Positive pressure would help keep the water out of your fuel. So that is how I equalized everything clear through the whole engine. And the whole thing is just run off of just my BC hose, or dry suit inflator hose, BC hose. It's just your typical BC adapter with a on-off valve, so if I wanted to unhook it underwater, I could shut it off to keep water out of the line, and away I go. The only problems I had when you're underwater, for some reason it runs really high compression, so if you shut it off underwater, you can't hardly even pull the starter. You have to go all the way back up to the surface to get it started again, and then go back down. And Oh, here's the original crankcase vent since I vented this originally, I think, originally went to the gas tank. It was supposed to have a check valve to keep the tank at a positive pressure. It did not work the way it was supposed to. It actually created a slight vacuum, so I just blocked that off completely. I don't even use it. So, lost track of where I was at here, but anyway, that's how it works. I did notice that as you go deeper, the air that it's running on is so dense, it's like running a turbocharger on it, and I was afraid to go deeper than about 30 feet just from the sound of the engine. It gets a real deep, kind of a deep rumble to it, like it's running real high compression, so I stopped at 30 feet and just played around from there. But it did run really good at 30 feet. Extra power, ran smoother, just didn't sound like you really wanted to push it much deeper. So anyway, that is in a nutshell.